Hello, and welcome back to Psychology 303, the analysis of everyday behavior. I'm Dr. Williams, and the next two lectures will cover Chapter 11, which deals with chaining. So, chains being long sequences of behavior until you get to the end when you get your reinforcers. So things like having your dog run an obstacle course to get a treat at the end, to as simple as baking a cake and making sure you do the ingredients and baking all in the right order, working our way through an ATM, even ordering a sandwich at Subway. Okay, so, all right, so a behavior chain, also known as a stimulus response chain, is basically a chain of behaviors that are comprised of two or more complete ABC units of behavior. So a series of two or more three-term contingencies. So the example here would be that the consequence, C1, for behavior B1 would also be the antecedent, A2, for behavior B2. This comes as a result of linking several of these ABC units together. And reinforcement isn't delivered until all the links in the chain are complete. Let me show you a sort of a diagram example here. So we have three behaviors in a chain of behaviors. We have behavior 1, behavior 2, and behavior 3. So the three-term contingency for behavior 1 is antecedent 1, behavior 1, and consequence 1. But the consequence for behavior 1, C1, is the same stimulus that will serve as the antecedent for behavior 2. So C1 is exactly the same stimulus as A2. Then you have another chain, another ABC unit. You have A2 leads to behavior 2, results in consequence 2, and consequence 2 is the stimulus or antecedent for behavior 3. So then you have A3, B3, and C3. So what would the next ABC unit look like? Let's see if you can figure that out. Okay, so it would be C3 would be the same as A4. So let me take my cursor. C3 here would be the beginning of the next unit, which would be A4, and C3 and A4 would be the same boxed in, and then you would have A4 leads to B4 leads to C4. I hope you got that right. So let me show you an example in real behavioral terms. This is an example of taking a piece of gum out and putting it in your mouth so you can chew it. So our first ABC unit is that you have a pack of gum. You can feel the pack of gum in your pocket. That's your antecedent. Your behavior 1 is to reach into your pocket, and the result, C1, is that your hand is in your pocket, and maybe you can feel that pack of gum. A2, C1 is the same as A2, so your hand is in your pocket, and that prompts you to pull out the pack of gum. So you pull your hand out, and the consequence is now you have a pack of gum in your hand. That's C2. That's the consequence of putting your hand in your pocket and pulling it out. Now you have the pack of gum in your hand. The pack of gum in your hand becomes the antecedent for behavior 3. So you now take out a stick of gum. You now have a stick of gum in your hand. So A3 leads to B3 leads to C3. And a stick of gum in your hand, which was C3, consequence 3 for behavior 3, now becomes the antecedent for the next behavior. You have a stick of gum in your hand, A4, so you now unwrap the stick of gum, which is B4, and now you have an unwrapped piece of gum in your hand, which is C4, and C4 becomes the prompt for the next chain, the next ABC sequence, A5. So A5, you have an unwrapped piece of gum in your hand, the behavior is to put it in your mouth, and the consequence 5 would be you get to chew your gum. You get your yummy reinforcement. So can you see how each of these are a single ABC unit built together and linked together from the beginning, a pack of gum in your pocket, all the way through to having a piece of gum in your mouth? There are lots of examples of behavior chains, lots and lots of them. Getting money out of the ATM, wonderful example. Backing out of the driveway in your car. Let's hope you do it all in the right sequence. especially the one where you open the garage door. Let's not drive backwards and then open the garage door. Making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, putting on your coat, making your bed, setting the table. So can you think of any other examples that we engage in? All right, so the first step in a behavior chain is, here I call it step 1, but I probably should call it step 0. Anyway, the first step is to do a task analysis. You need to break down the behavior chain into its component ABC pieces. So you want to, and you can do this a number of ways. You can watch someone who's very competent do the behavior change, and you can take notes and write them out. You can ask, or you can watch an expert. You could maybe look it up on Google. Or you could perform the chain yourself and take notes as you go through each of the ABC or stimulus response parts. Okay, so the task analysis is really just the first step in an entire planned out sequence that's used to show a learner how to complete a complex task using simple step-by-step instructions. And so the task analysis part is really associated with developing those step-by-step instructions. And this entire system of chaining can be used to teach a variety of skills. They work for academic tasks, they work for behavioral tasks, they work for communication and social skills. It's really ideal if you can customize your task analysis to the level of the ability of the learner. You really want the detail, you want a level of detail that is specific to the learner. So higher functioning individuals, your task may be more broad and general, your task analysis, but with people with learning disabilities or with animals, for example, you might want more detail, smaller steps. Okay, so you want to tailor that. And the number of steps you're going to need will really depend on who the learner is. Task analysis is really important in applied behavior analysis and special education. That we know. But it's also used in job training when the behavior that you're talking about is really complex or even dangerous. So the idea of breaking down important tasks into teachable units is important in places like nuclear power plants. It's biological waste management, chemistry, where if you're working for a chemical company, in medicine, like the CDC, being able to handle dangerous viruses and bacteria is something you need to be very careful about. To work for the CDC, you're going to see a lot of task analyses so that you do your research behaviors in the right order. Astronomy, how to work a giant telescope. All of these, any place where there's complex behaviors, you could use task analysis. So right now I'd like you to pause the PowerPoint and go to the assignments section to lecture videos to Unit 7 and watch videos 11B and 11C to give you some examples of some task analyses. Okay, welcome back. So let me talk to you a little bit about specific forms of chaining. There's forward chaining and there's backward chaining. Chains can be trained, but sometimes it makes more sense to start at the beginning and learn each step as you go. And sometimes it makes more sense to learn the behavior that produces the reinforcer first and then gradually add the preceding behavior until you get to the beginning. So in forward chaining, we start at the beginning and work our way through. In backward chaining, we teach each of the steps in a backward manner. So we teach the last behavior first, followed by the second to the last behavior and the third to the last behavior until we get to the first response in the chain. So let's talk a little bit about forward chaining. Forward chaining works really, really well for simple behavior chains that only have a few steps. Especially when the steps are easy to remember and when the client gets all the way to reinforcement very quickly. So, for example, learning how to use a fork or a spoon, you could probably start at the beginning because it's only going to have a few steps. They'll be easy to remember, and you get to the food quickly. Learning how to put on your shirt, there's only a few components to that. Learning how to set the table, also fairly simple. But with forward chaining, we rely pretty heavily on prompting. So you teach one component in the chain at a time, beginning with the very first behavior in the chain and work forward. You're going to use prompting to teach the behavior associated with each antecedent. So here you would, and then you would reinforce each step as you go. So you start at the beginning, you start with A1, you present the antecedent stimulus. If they don't respond to it, then you provide a prompt, and then you get behavior 1, and that leads to consequence 1, which sometimes has to be an artificial reinforcer, like a verbal reinforcer or a pat on the back saying, good job. Okay. So here's an example. Setting the table. There's nothing on the table, and your original prompt might be, set the table, Michaela. And when there's nothing, she looks at the table, there's nothing on the table. If she doesn't move or do anything, then you say, go get the plates, Michaela. And then she goes and gets the plates. And the plates are stacked on the table. And you say, good job, Michaela. So you put in that artificial reinforcer. Good job, Michaela. The plates are on the table. Now that the plates are on the table, that should prompt her next behavior to put each plate at each setting. If she doesn't do that, then you prompt her. Put the plates around the table, Michaela. She then moves to put the plates around the table. Once the plates are at each seat, that is the conclusion. That's the consequence. But you may have to put in an artificial reinforcer. Good job, Michaela. You have a plate at each seat. And that becomes the next prompt. Sometimes you can insert a prompt that follows C1, which is what's next. It's a very general verbal prompt. So you would say, go get the plates, Michaela. She would get them. The plates would be stacked. You say, good job, Michaela. If she doesn't respond, then you could say, what's next? And then if she continues to not respond, you could say, put the plates around the table. So depending on how far along she is in the sequence. So now I'd like you to pause the PowerPoint and go back to the lecture series and watch videos 11D and 11E that show you examples of forward chaining. Then come back. Okay. Now, when you have these prompts, you will need to fade them. We really want the immediate consequence of one of the ABC units to serve as the antecedent for the next ABC unit in each chain. So as the individual gets better and better moving through the steps, you can start to delay your verbal prompts or eliminate physical prompts, and you can transfer control to the natural discriminative stimuli or to the natural cues or antecedents for the next behavior that are in the environment itself. All right, so I'm going to stop here. That's the ending of this first section. I'm going to pick up with 11B and talk about backward chaining. So have a good day.